September 25, 1918, near Billy, France. A single Spad dives towards 7 German aircraft. 5 Fokkers guarding 2 Halberstadts. The odds are obvious. The pilot does not circle or wait. He commits. At close range, he fires. 1 Fokker falls out of control. He presses again. A Halberstadt goes down. The formation breaks. There is no audience in the sky, no speeches, no ceremony, only distance, timing, and the decision to close. The pilot is Edward Vernon Rickenbacker. He did not begin in the air. He began in machine shops, around engines that shook and failed if pushed too far. He learned early how to push anyway. Edward Vernon Rickenbacker was born on October 8, 1890, in Columbus, Ohio. His parents were Swiss immigrants. His father, William, worked in construction. His mother, Elizabeth, kept the household steady with strict religion and quiet endurance. The family did not live comfortably. They lived carefully. The house had no electricity, no indoor plumbing. The land around it was used for vegetables and goats. Work was constant. Money was not. When Eddie was 13, his father was killed at a construction site. The details were debated later, but the result was not. The family lost its primary provider. School ended for Eddie almost immediately. He quit in the 7th grade. He left school for wages, not because of ability. He worked nights in a glass factory. He lied about his age to get the job. He moved from there to a steel casting company, then to a brewery, then to a bowling alley, then to the Pennsylvania Railroad as an apprentice machinist. Each job taught him something about tools, tolerances, and failure. Metal either held under pressure or it did not. Bolts either tightened correctly or they sheared. There was no debate once force was applied. He was not romantic about work. He viewed every position as a transaction, hours exchanged for stability. But he paid attention. He watched how engines were assembled. He learned how vibration felt through the floorboards. He absorbed the logic of moving parts. Around 1905, he saw his first automobile, a 2-passenger Ford runabout. It was loud, unstable, and unreliable by modern standards. To him, it was proof that motion could be manufactured. The automobile industry was new. It had not yet sorted itself into giants and casualties. Companies formed quickly and disappeared just as fast. For a young mechanic with no formal education but sharp instincts, it was an opening. He took correspondence courses in mechanical engineering to sharpen his understanding. He found work at a local garage. Then he moved into automobile manufacturing. Acceleration followed naturally. The dirt tracks of the Midwest were unforgiving. Surfaces shifted, engines overheated, tires shredded. Drivers were expected to fix their own machines between heats. Rickenbacker was not the most polished driver, but he was disciplined. He understood that machinery rewarded precision. He began racing professionally before the First World War. In 1911, he participated in the first Indianapolis 500. By 1916, he had won multiple races on the American Automobile Association circuit and placed high in championship standings. His reputation grew not only because he drove fast, but because he understood why the car moved the way it did. He treated speed as calculation, not chaos. On the track, hesitation cost position. Overcorrection cost control. Every lap demanded judgment under pressure. Those lessons did not remain on the dirt. When the United States entered the European War in 1917, Rickenbacker was already known in racing circles. He had mechanical credibility, public recognition, and a familiarity with risk. He also had something else, a restlessness that had never been satisfied by staying still. He enlisted in May of that year. At first, the Army did not place him in a cockpit. It placed him behind a steering wheel. But he had never been content to remain where he was first assigned. When Eddie Rickenbacker enlisted in May 1917, he entered the Army as a Sergeant First Class in the Signal Enlisted Reserve Corps. Within days, he was on his way to France. Because of his racing reputation, he was assigned as a staff driver to General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Forces. It was a position of trust. It also kept him far from combat. He drove staff cars around French roads that were crowded with supply columns and fresh American units. He listened, he watched, he absorbed how the Army functioned at scale, but the job felt temporary. He wanted to fly. The Army Air Service was still new and expanding quickly. Age limits and education requirements worked against him. He lacked formal schooling and was technically older than the preferred candidates. Those barriers slowed him. They did not stop him. With the help of senior officers who recognized both his mechanical experience and public profile, he secured transfer into flight training in France. He reported to the 2nd Aviation Instruction Center at Tours. Flying in 1917 was not routine. Aircraft were fragile wood and fabric structures powered by temperamental engines. Training accidents were common. Navigation was basic. A pilot had to manage fuel mixture, engine temperature, altitude, and wind drift while keeping the machine intact. Rickenbacker's background helped. He was comfortable around engines that shook and coughed. He understood vibration. He knew when a sound signaled trouble and when it did not. Where some trainees focused on the romance of flight, he focused on the mechanics. He completed training and was commissioned a first lieutenant. For a time, he was assigned as an engineering officer at Issoudun, a major American aviation training center. The work mattered. The base needed organization and mechanical oversight. He improved process and addressed equipment issues. After repeated requests, he was assigned to the 94th Aero Squadron, part of the 1st Pursuit Group. The squadron carried an emblem of a top hat inside a ring, a symbol that declared American participation in the fight. The 94th was among the first all-American pursuit squadrons to see combat. Its pilots flew Newport 28s and later SPAD 8 fighters. They operated over the Western Front in an air war that had evolved rapidly since 1914. Air combat was still new enough that tactics were being written in real time. Pilots learned through trial, error, and loss. Situational awareness mattered more than bravado. Aircraft could climb and dive quickly, but structural limits were real. One misjudged maneuver could snap wings or stall the engine. Rickenbacker entered this environment without illusions. He was not from an aristocratic background. He was not a career officer shaped by academy tradition. He was a mechanic turned racer turned soldier, now placed in a cockpit over France. On April 25, 1918, he scored his first confirmed aerial victory. The learning curve was steep. Every engagement exposed something new about aircraft performance, about enemy tactics, about the limits of nerve. Within weeks, he accumulated additional victories. By June 1, 1918, he had achieved 5 confirmed kills and was considered an ace. He did not present himself as fearless. He studied, he adapted, he adjusted angles and timing the way he once adjusted throttle and steering. The air war rewarded clarity under pressure. Rickenbacker was beginning to find his rhythm in it. In late April and May of 1918, his victories accumulated. He attacked German monoplanes over occupied France. He engaged larger formations and dispersed them. By early summer, he had firmly established himself among the most effective American pilots in the sector. The work carried cost. The squadron lost men. Aircraft failed. Weather obscured targets and forced landings in uncertain terrain. During the summer, Rickenbacker himself suffered a severe mastoid infection and spent weeks hospitalized in Paris. Even away from the front, the war pressed in. When he returned to duty, he did not return cautiously. He returned determined. On September 24, 1918, he assumed command of the 94th Aero Squadron. Leadership in combat required more than flying skill. It required judgment over where to commit men and when to withdraw. A squadron commander set tone as much as tactics. Rickenbacker led from the front. He did not assign a patrol he would not fly himself. The final major American offenses of the war were underway. Air patrols increased in frequency. Enemy resistance remained organized and capable. The sky over the Western Front was crowded with reconnaissance planes, observation balloons, and fighter escorts protecting them. On September 25, 1918, Rickenbacker launched on a voluntary patrol near Billy, France. Ahead of him, he sighted 7 enemy aircraft, 5 Fokker fighters guarding the 2 Halberstadts. The formation had numerical advantage and protective structure. 7 against 1 is a bad equation, unless the 1 decides to change the order of operations. Rickenbacker returned from that patrol with 2 confirmed victories added to his record. Years later, that action would form the basis of the Medal of Honor awarded to him in 1930. At the time, it was another mission completed in a month full of them. He continued flying through October. On October 30th, he achieved his 26th confirmed victory. The war ended on November 11, 1918. When he returned to the United States in early 1919, he was widely referred to as America's leading ace. The title carried weight. It also carried expectation. But the air war that defined him had been built on something simpler than legend: altitude, angle, and the refusal to yield position once committed. When the war ended in November 1918, Eddie Rickenbacker's record stood at 26 confirmed aerial victories. The 94th Aero Squadron had become one of the most recognized American pursuit units in France. Its hat-in-the-ring insignia carried both identity and pride. Rickenbacker, as its commander, returned home with a reputation that extended beyond aviation circles. He returned to headlines. The United States had entered the war late. It had produced capable pilots, but no figure matched Rickenbacker's confirmed tally. Newspapers embraced the story. The former race car driver who had fought in the sky fit a narrative the public understood: mechanical skill turned martial precision. He had also been decorated heavily. In addition to the later Medal of Honor for September 25, 1918, he received 8 Distinguished Service Crosses. These decorations reflected sustained performance, not a single dramatic act. He was not the only effective American pilot, but he was the most statistically prominent. Upon returning in 1919, he was welcomed as a national figure. Parades followed, interviews multiplied. The public appetite for wartime heroes was strong, and Rickenbacker filled that space. He did not reshape himself into something theatrical. He spoke plainly. He described engagements without exaggeration. He emphasized training and discipline. He resisted the idea that success in combat came from instinct alone. To him, aerial victory was not mystery. It was preparation meeting opportunity. The label Ace of Aces attached itself quickly. It was concise. It was marketable. It was also reductive. It compressed months of patrols, mechanical strain, hospital recovery, leadership pressure, and personal risk into a phrase that fit headlines. Rickenbacker did not spend much time defending or redefining it. He moved forward. The transition from military to civilian life was not seamless. Aviation remained limited in the immediate post-war years. Commercial air travel was not yet widespread. The skills he had developed in the air did not automatically convert into peacetime industry. In October 1942, during the Second World War, Eddie Rickenbacker accepted a special assignment at the request of Secretary of War Henry Stimson. He was to travel to the Pacific Theater and deliver a message to General Douglas MacArthur, along with inspecting conditions and morale at forward bases. He departed from Hawaii aboard a B-17 Flying Fortress. The aircraft carried 8 men: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, radio operator, flight mechanics, Rickenbacker, and his aide. Navigation in the Pacific was not forgiving. Charts were limited. Weather reports were imperfect. On a flight intended to refuel at Canton Island, the crew missed their mark. The aircraft overshot its destination. Fuel diminished steadily. When it became clear that land would not appear in time, the pilot ditched the B-17 in the Pacific. The impact destroyed the aircraft. The men escaped into 3 rubber life rafts and lashed themselves together to avoid separation. They were hundreds of miles off course. The first days passed with rationed water and emergency supplies. The sun was constant. Salt covered their skin, and rescue did not come quickly. After several days, the food ran out. On the 8th day, a seagull landed on Rickenbacker's head. He remained still long enough for the others to seize it. The bird provided food and bait. Fish were caught in small quantities afterward, but not consistently. Time lost structure. Thirst increased. Exposure weakened them. One crew member, Sergeant Alex Kazmarczyk, died after approximately 2 weeks at sea. The Pacific does not adjust itself to human rank or reputation. It reduces everyone to endurance and water. Rickenbacker had survived air combat over France. He had survived hospital infection and mechanical failure. This was different. There was no enemy formation to attack, no angle to adjust, no engine to repair. What remained was discipline. Rations were divided carefully. Hope was managed. Arguments were contained. He encouraged prayer and routine to keep minds from collapsing inward. After 24 days adrift, Navy search aircraft located the rafts in the Ellis Island chain, more than 500 miles beyond the intended course. The survivors were rescued on November 13, 1942. Rickenbacker did not return home immediately. After brief recovery, he continued on portions of his original inspection mission across Pacific installations, reporting back to Stimson and Army leadership in December. The ordeal amplified his public stature once again. The story of survival spread across newspapers. The image of a Medal of Honor recipient drifting across open ocean for more than 3 weeks reinforced the narrative of resilience that had followed him since 1918. But survival at sea did not resemble victory in the air. There were no opponents to outmaneuver, no calculations to exploit. The only opponent was time. The episode also demonstrated something that had been visible in earlier chapters of his life. He did not separate himself from the men around him. In combat, he had led from the front. On the rafts, he endured alongside the crew. In both cases, survival depended on commitment. The war years ended, the business battles intensified, technology accelerated. Speed was changing form again, from propellers to jets. Rickenbacker would have to decide how far he was willing to adapt. By the end of the Second World War, commercial aviation was no longer experimental. It was expanding quickly. Passenger expectations rose, aircraft range increased. The industry that Rickenbacker had entered in the 1920s was becoming something larger and more competitive. As head of Eastern Airlines, he pushed for efficiency and route expansion. He believed airlines should operate as disciplined businesses, not as permanent recipients of government assistance. Eastern competed aggressively for mail contracts and passenger corridors, particularly along the southern tier of the United States. Under his leadership, Eastern adopted advanced aircraft such as the Lockheed Constellation in the immediate post-war years. The airline cultivated operational reliability and internal loyalty. Employees often referred to the Eastern family, reflecting the culture Rickenbacker encouraged: structured, performance-focused, and direct. For a time, the model worked. Eastern became one of the most profitable carriers in the country during the late 1940s and early 1950s. Rickenbacker's name carried weight with investors and regulators alike. He was not merely an executive. He was a decorated combat veteran and a recognized aviation pioneer. But the industry did not pause. By the mid to late 1950s, jet aircraft began redefining commercial travel. Speed increased dramatically. Passenger expectations shifted toward shorter travel times and modern design. Competitors began transitioning rapidly into jet fleets. Rickenbacker hesitated. He had built Eastern around turboprop aircraft, which were reliable and economical. He viewed jets as expensive and potentially premature investments. He favored caution where others favored acceleration. He had built an airline on pace, then found that pace itself had changed definition. The resistance was not rooted in ignorance. It reflected his long-standing pattern: reinforce what works before abandoning it. In racing, that instinct preserved engines. In combat, it preserved pilots. In corporate aviation, it became a liability when market momentum moved faster than internal adaptation. Tension developed within Eastern's leadership. Younger executives pushed for faster modernization. Shareholders watched competitors gain ground. The board's confidence in Rickenbacker's strategic judgment began to erode. In 1959, he was removed as chief executive officer of Eastern Airlines. He remained chairman for several more years before fully retiring at the end of 1963. The removal did not erase what he had built. Eastern had grown into a major national carrier under his direction. Its operational culture bore his imprint. But the episode demonstrated the limits of a leadership style forged in eras where personal authority carried greater weight than market speed. Edward Vernon Rickenbacker was born before powered flight and died in the jet age. In one lifetime, he moved from dirt tracks to combat patrols to transcontinental airlines. He began as a mechanic. Racing taught him speed. War taught him consequence. The Pacific taught him endurance. Business taught him that momentum does not wait. He lost contests as well. His car company failed. His airline leadership ended in conflict. Public opinion shifted in his later years. But one pattern never changed. When he saw 7 aircraft over France in 1918, he did not hesitate. He closed. That instinct carried him through victory, failure, survival, and reinvention. He was not a mythic figure. He was a man who committed fully to the field in front of him, whether it was a track, a cockpit, a raft, or a boardroom. The century accelerated around him. He kept moving with it as long as he could. I'm Dave. I appreciate you watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And until next time, stand tall.
Oh, Dave.